It might even round these out so it's not flat in here. There's a lot of things that can happen that give you unwanted results, right? But if you're using it for geometry that's in the distance or other things, it's great, right? It's more, I'd say, distance related stuff. It's a lot better for when you use these automatic tools. But let's say I wanted this exactly like it is, but right now there's just way too much geometry to get this to run on, let's say, a mobile device, right? And I want to really, really make it as good as it should be. What I would do is I would use a tool like TopoGun. And you'll notice a lot of big industry companies use TopoGun to do their characters, do high-res characters that you sculpt in a sculpting program like Mudbox or ZBrush. You can actually take that down into a program like TopoGun, get very close to the same result with like a third of the geometry, or maybe even a tenth of the geometry that you had before. You bake all that detail in. I always like to use it for characters, and then I found, you know what, I'm gonna try it on geometry too, like how good would it be? And I found that it's actually really great to give me more of that custom, precise geometry that I want when I'm doing a game, which is really, really great instead of using these automatic tools. Because I noticed I would use automatic tools like T4M and other things, and while they're awesome tools, sometimes they would give me unwanted results. So for what we're doing right now, I'll just show it to you in TopoGun and how I use it in my workflow. Cool. Here's the geometry I made. Just really quickly, we kind of threw this together just to kind of show you what we're doing. And in here, I'm going to export this geometry using that script that we got. You're going to get this new option up here called terrain. That won't exist unless you have that script in editor. You're going to use that export terrain.cs tool. You're going to use that, go export to OBJ. And OBJ is a 3D file format that you
One of the
can
common
open
formats, FBX, OBJ.
Exactly. And you can open this, once I export to OBJ, I can open it in Maya, I can open it everywhere, and it's gonna give me the actual geometry I want. It's gonna give you two options in it too. It's gonna give you the option to export it as quads or the option to export as triangles. I'm gonna export it as quads because most 3D model programs that you use, you can actually model in quads, and it makes it a little bit easier.
Okay.
Triangles becomes more of a headache. Even though Unity uses triangles, it's good to export this in quads so you have more of an editable model that you can use.
Ah, I see.
So you can also export it in a specific resolution, and it will degrade it for you when you do that. So we're going to export it in full resolution with quads. Let's export our model. We'll export it to our desktop. We'll just call it terrain for now. Export that OBJ, and then it's going to save out that OBJ for you. And it's a really, really great script that somebody wrote for this. It really, really helps out a ton. Highly recommend it.
Thank you, whoever wrote that script.
Exactly. I think his name's on that Unity wiki. So if now that we have our terrain exported, we'll close Unity. Well, let me close some of this other stuff I have. We'll go into TopoGun, and this is TopoGun. And TopoGun you can get on topogun.com. They allow you to download a trial version, but you can't save out anything, which is, we won't be able to save this out, but I can kind of show you how to do it in TopoGun. So once we're in TopoGun, the controls are very, very similar to Unity. Or Maya, if you use Maya. You use Alt to kind of navigate around and come in and out. You can use F to focus on things exactly the same way. You're going to want to set up a project, which we had already done. And then you're going to want to load in your reference object right here. So you click Load Reference. And then from there, we go to our desktop. We find that terrain object that we created, and we load that in. Then it brings in that terrain, and there's our terrain we exported from Unity.
Wow.
See it right there. Right?
So it sees everything exported, locate, imported, locate. That's a good sign so far.
And what's great with TopoGun is you can have models that have millions of polys on it.
Millions.
And it doesn't necessarily bring, it brings in like, I guess a reference of the model. It's not actually bringing the model, so it runs extremely fast. You're not actually editing the model itself. It's just kind of using it as a guide. And then on here, you have your toolbar in TopoGun, which are these tools right here. And this is just the tool that I use. There's tons of tools available. I've just found this to be the easiest. And what's great about this is you'll notice if I exported that OBJ and brought it into a program like Maya, I would have to kind of visually model along the side of that model, which is really hard, where this tool allows you to model and just create, it kind of sticks everything to the model. So as let's say I really wanted to get this valley kind of looking how I wanted to, I'm going to grab my simple create tool, which is right here, and I'll start just creating verts. And I can go along this model and just start kind of drawing out where I want these.
And let's the lines.
Yeah, you're just making these verts as you go, these vertexes. And let's say you wanted to save polys, you could do larger vertexes. And do these, really get in there and add these. And then you can move them around too, like that one's a little up. And what it's doing is it's actually modeling alongside my model. And you can see why this is really great for characters or terrains. or whatever. And you just kind of go through here and do what you want to do. And then you can go up and just start going up the sides of these hills, just kind of tracing out how you want this to look. And what's great is you're manually doing this, so you have full control over what you want this to look like.
So by modeling out just a region there, what are you kind of saying? I mean, you're outlining it, but that's just going to be like one optimized region, so to say?
Yeah, and when you're done, I mean, it takes a long time to actually use this tool.
Yeah.
It's a very time-consuming process, but the result you're going to get is going to be really, really beneficial to your game. So as you can see right now, there's probably 1,000, maybe even more, maybe 10,000 polys that exist within just this region alone. I can go through here, and as I trace that out, I can just start making the sides of those the way I want, and actually just start connecting these and really helping. What's great is, I'm just going to use the side of this mountain as a reference just to kind of show you how this tool works. But as I go through, and just use the simple create, you want to hold down control. If you're using this tool and you've never used it before, you're just holding control a lot, clicking the points and just clicking from point to point to point, going through.
So multi-select control in a lot of programs is used for multi-select.
Exactly.
Same thing.
And as it does it, it creates. And then I look at that and I can kind of look at that, go, oh, okay, that's pretty good. Maybe it doesn't have some of the advantages of the roundness of the hill, but it's pretty close to what I'm looking for. I saved
work great.
Mobile. It's fantastic for mobile. And I can come up here and I can just kind of go in and start, adding in different elements that need to work for the geometry I'm trying to produce. And let's say we want the top. We wanted the character to be on top of here and just drop straight off and be more in line with what we were trying to produce. And same thing, you just kind of go in here and just kind of create those areas.
Fill that whole area in.
Fill it in. Yeah.
You always have to fill in the area?
Always have to fill in the areas,
okay.
Because it's essentially modeling a 3D model as you go and you do this. So you just want to be kind of diligent and get in there and fill in all these areas. And so basically, as you go around and you model these vertexes and everything around your entire model, it's basically creating this cage of your initial model that's super, super low poly, from what you had. And what's great too is if you're using things like vertex shaders, once you're done with this, it's got great tools to let you bake all that information into that low res model. So you can actually take all that high res data, like the shadows and the cavities and different things, build that into that low res model.
So it looks great.
And it looks great, and you can use different shaders and everything. So it's a really, really great tool in order to just create more of a low res version of a high res model. I'm just gonna go through here, just like here's that pathway. You just kind of go through and then you can, use the bind tool here and just start going through and just creating these. And I use this all the time. Every day, I'd say I use this for custom terrain. You just get a better result than just a standard decimator. And that'll allow you too, if let's say you had a really high detailed portion of the map, right? But the rest of it was maybe kind of flat, and you wanted to have a nice seamless transition instead of just sticking that one high-res piece onto your model. You can, create these really low-res kind of areas with just a couple of tries, and then have a super high-res, like take a lot of detail and build that out right next to it. So just wanted to kind of touch on this. It's a really great tool to go through.
Once you build it out like that, what do you have to do then to use it? To
get it? So all you do is once you build the model out, and we won't build this entire thing, but it's just kind of an idea to show you how these tools work. It's just a really, really intuitive, just kind of easy tool. And the fact that it automatically kind of traces along your model as you go.
That's pretty cool.
It's just awesome. Like I haven't seen anything that's as good as this. But really, once you're done and you have your model, let's say we've traced this entire map and it's exactly how we want. Or even, we only traced a portion of it and we didn't want all this stuff, right? We didn't want all this extra unusable terrain that's out here, and we wanted to just go along the edge, and we just kind of came through and just kind of did one of these around the edge and just cut this out, right? And we didn't want a messy cut like you do with just deleting a bunch of tries out of an OBJ, and we just wanted to kind of outline the edge of this map, right? You're just kind of going down here, and we're like, okay, that's good. We don't need all this extra distance stuff, right? You're like, that's perfect for my map. It's great. You can just model that, keep that all as one piece, and then when you're done, you just go to File, and on here they don't allow you. You just save your scene, put .obj as it, and it's going to tell you what folder you want to put it in, and you'll have that model. It won't put the reference with it. It'll just keep the actual model that you modeled in here. You'll have your OBJ. You can bring it into Unity or any 3D program.
Right back into Unity. And
you can bring it into Maya. You can do a little more unwrapping on it, do some different things to it, bring it into Unity, do whatever you want. You've got a great usable piece of geometry to use, and it's exactly the way you want it. So just a really, really good tool if you're trying to optimize high-res characters and you want them to look exactly how your high-res characters look, but in more of a low-quality feel. Or it's great for terrain too. Like here, you can go through, absolutely trace this entire terrain, make it exactly how you want with very, very little degradation and more custom to the type of feel and look you're trying to do with less geometry.
You mentioned the word kind of unwrapping inside of Maya. That's just a process of taking the mesh of your 3D model, flattening it out so you can kind of paint on that 2D surface.
So yeah, you basically UV unwrapping. Let's say you have custom things happening on your model where you've got caves and valleys and different areas that, you know, if you were going to do a standard projection and unwrap, like you wouldn't be able to get into those. You can actually get in, separate those out into different UV shells, kind of be conscious of where the seams of those edges are going to meet up and stuff, but have more of a complete kind of model with perfect stretch. There won't be a lot of stretching, things like that happening.
That's one of the things I noticed in the terrain built into Unity, that when you do that, if I have mountains and I start painting textures on them, those textures get stretched way out.
Exactly. And so if you want to get rid of things like that, a good way to do it is trace the model in a program like Topogon or whichever 3D. There's a lot of topology programs that work. I just happen to use this because I think it's intuitive and very easy and very close to Unity as well. Once you're done with it, export the model, bring it into a program like Unity. Then you want to do your UV unwrapping in Unity, maybe in different shells, kind of be conscious of where the seams are going to be, where those UVs meet up. And then you have that texture map, then you can take that out, do more of the texturing in another program like Mudbox or ZBrush or whatever.
Very cool.
Export that, and maybe even use vertex shaders and different things to kind of blend it all together. So there's different ways you can do it. Yeah, but this is a really great tip on how to do that.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you very much. So this is hopefully an information pack. This is our longest session that we'll have of the entire series, but I think some of the most important information, so it's all very appropriate for what you're going to see.
Absolutely.
We're going to we'll be doing a 15-minute break. We're going to be coming back then after that with the next session. So stay tuned for some more exciting stuff today. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Developing Games for Unity. I am David Crook. You can reach me on Twitter at DavidCrook1988. I'm a technical evangelist for Microsoft. I focus on gaming, cloud development operations. I'm huge on idea to delivery. Based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, ALM Ranger. I did development operations consulting at Fortune 100 companies. And you can see my contact information on the slide below. You can reach me at indiedevspot.com and also on Twitter at DavidCrook1988. And this is Dave Voiles again. You guys should be pretty familiar with him at this point. There we go. There's his slide.
So my second time back. I was here yesterday for a few of the courses, and now my first time back today, again with David Crook. So like David mentioned, we're going to be going over ALM, or Application Lifecycle Management. But Dave, you had mentioned before that you are an ALM Ranger, which sounds way cooler than my last job, which was just simply an engineer. So why don't you take a minute and explain what an ALM Ranger actually is?
So an ALM Ranger, it's not really a job title. It's just occasionally we would do work on the side to produce documentation for how do you actually do branching and merging, how do you do source control, what is this TFS thing? So we'd find gaps in what's going on in the enterprise coding as far as process management and running actual source control, and we'd write the documentation for that.
Okay. So it sounds like you're the perfect person to kind of ask about this and have really a lot of hands-on experience for what we're about to go over.
About 3.5 years in the enterprise doing this, and it's just been a huge experience, and it's great to take that experience and apply it to video games.
Perfect.
So again, this is Module 7, ALM for Unity, and that's going to be exactly what we're talking about. Module overview, the first thing is, what is ALM? I've heard a lot of questions. Application Lifecycle Management. Oh, do you mean my game's paused? No, that is not what we're talking about. Second is, what is TFS? Project management, source control, and general development workflow.
Okay.
So the first thing is, what is ALM? There's a lot of things out there about what ALM actually is. There's release management, there's testing, your development process, version control, but at the end of the day, it's really project management. It's how do I build an application and how do I release that application? It's the whole end-to-end process.
So it looks like there are a lot of people consider it to be a lot of things, but really we're going to be very specific about what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, we're going to cover the main key points, which will be version control, project management, and we're also going to talk about the actual development process and show some of the tools that I use in my day-to-day development on how we actually go about doing that.
Okay, so I guess project management could cover quite a few different things, right? But it seems to be similar regardless of what field you're working in. So why don't you go over what project management entails exactly?
Yeah, so before we get into project management, I want to talk about Team Foundation Server. This is what I use to manage my projects entirely. Team Foundation Server is the Microsoft suite for doing ALM and project management, source control. I like Visual Studio Online. I check everything into visualstudio.com. I don't always work with the same people, and when I do work with people, it's usually all over the place. I've got, well, you in Philadelphia.
Right,
I was
both work
with.
remotely.
Yeah, so it's really great to use Visual Studio Online. People can get access to the tools everywhere. It's all about teams, project management, source control. There's builds, coded UI tests, just tons of stuff. So that's really the tool that I like to use for this. And project management. So what is project management? Why is this so important? Well, it really helps you with the high-level goals of what you're trying to achieve. What kind of game are we building? What are the features of that game? How do we break down those features into tasks? What are the timelines that we're trying to execute this on? I've got an entire workforce that's working on this. I've got artists, I've got coders, I've got maybe a puppet. I have a puppeteer. Yeah, I actually have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I got to see how they're actually executing against this plan and what our resource usage looks like. Are we actually using these people the way that we mean to, and are they performing their tasks on time?
Okay, so it sounds like a great way of just communicating and making sure that everyone on the team is on the same page, regardless of how large or small your team may be.
Exactly, yeah. I've worked on teams where a couple of our enterprise clients have over 2,000 developers, and organizing that many developers simultaneously is a bit of a challenge, and this is actually the tool that we use to do that. So at the beginning of project management, we usually do every day is a stand-up meeting. You know, you walk into a room and it's, what do we have to do? And we facilitate this with what's called the board. So we do our stand-up meetings, we work together, do our tasks, close them out, and go home. The board is the perfect place to do this. Over the past couple of days, I've started putting together a sample project to kind of show what this looks like, specifically for games. And we'll do a quick demo on what that actually looks like.
All right, so Eric's going to show us the board and what it looks like to visualize these communications.
So this is Visual Studio Online. This is the home page that you get. When I want to do anything that's work specific, you have a little tab at the top that says work. That's where you want to go to see what's going on with your work.
Okay.
So when I come over to work, you get backlogs, queries. I can see what my backlog items are, but you'll see this little note that says board. If I click on Sprint 1, this is the current iteration of work that we're doing, and I can see the backlog again specifically for what we're trying to do with this game during this sprint.
Okay, how would you define a sprint? Is a sprint like one day or several weeks?
So to really break it down, you've got a release which is formed of a couple of sprints. And those sprints are anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks long. I do a lot of side projects, so my sprints I try to keep 3 weeks long because I'm usually doing part-time work, maybe an hour or two a day. And trying to break into the industry can be really tough, so I always try to do about 3-week sprints for that.
Kind of pace yourself along the way.
Exactly, and that allows my team to have a fair amount of leeway. And if you can see, this is a really cool feature for looking at a typical sprint. You can see between 9/1 and 9/5, we did absolutely zero work.
Yeah.
So having those 3 weeks really helps you take a look at how you're doing and executing against your tasks and say, oh gosh, it's 9:05. I really need to execute some work. So it looks like on 9:05 we got a fair amount done, and we're back on track again.
Great way to track progress and make sure that, again, everyone's on the same page. We're constantly communicating. And so it doesn't just fall on the hands of one person. Instead, it's the entire team who's commonly looking at this board to make sure that they're all working on the same projects at the same time.
Exactly. And when we want to do these stand-up meetings, the first thing that we'll do is we'll all get together online. We'll use Link Online or Skype or some sort of tool like that.
Yeah.
And we'll pull up this board that you can see on my screen. And you can see that I've got a couple of backlog items. We got build the main character assets. We've got design the input. And then we actually have to go and build this input. And you can see we've got about 21 hours to do. The in progress is kind of scary right now. We don't have anything in progress, probably because we're out here recording.
Yeah.
And then on the done, you can see what we've completed in this sprint. So this first meeting will come in each day and we'll say, okay, what do you got to do? What's done? What's in progress? What's your status? Do you rely on anything that I've got going on?
Okay, basically dependencies.
Exactly. So one of these guys, RN, he's one of my friends that's working on this project with me. He's going to be doing a lot of the art assets. But we ended up having to reallocate drawing the main character. So he's going to be blocked on smooth move. So when we go and have these actual discussions, he's supposed to do the animation, but the main character hasn't been drawn. So these are the meetings where you discover those kinds of problems.
Right. This way you can kind of stop it before it becomes a problem, right? You can say, I've noticed you haven't worked on this in a couple of days, so should I be working on something else in the meantime? Exactly.
It helps you really tune your resource allocation. That's definitely very critical. So that's kind of the overview of what the board looks like. Let me get to the correct slide deck presentation here.
Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like this could save people a lot of trouble just by being organized with these projects, a lot of communication back and forth. And how do we get these board items on there? Are these things that you and I are both agreeing on at the same time, or?
So that's actually the next topic. So what we want to talk about next is actually putting items onto this board. We've got features, product backlog items, tasks, timelines, team capacity, burn down. We've said a lot of these words already, but let's start talking about what some of these actually are and put some of these in here. There's some new features. This is a brand new game that I'm working on, so there's a lot of features that need to be added. So, you know, we're going to do all this live here. So let's start by talking about what is a feature. A feature could be, I've got a slow time component to my game. This particular game has a slow time. It's really, really buggy, so I haven't actually added it as a feature onto this game yet. And there's a lot of components that make up this slow time feature. There's graphical components, there's code components, there's management components. Those would all be product backlog items. So I could say that the time bar for, you know, when we click the slow time button, that's going to start a timer and the bar is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, there's art assets and there's coding that goes into that. So the time bar would be the product backlog item. And the task itself would be somebody's got to draw the time bar, somebody's got to code the time bar, somebody's got to put the time bar into the game, and then they got to put it in all the levels. So that would be the actual individual tasks.
So a term I commonly hear for this is something like a story. How would you relate a story to a feature?
So a story would be like, as a user, I want to do whatever. As a user, I want to be able to slow time in my game. So I map features directly to stories, and then I break those stories down into product backlog items and tasks.
Perfect.
So to actually go about doing this, we're going to switch the screen back over to this board, and we're going to click on this little button here that says Features at the top. So when we click on this and we see all the features, we can see I've got a main character and I've got input for the game. This is kind of
pretty broad.
Yeah, pretty broad for the features.
Sounds like we have to break it down into smaller things at some point.
Exactly. So we're going to click on the backlog and make sure that you're on this backlog view, and you want this view here to show features. This will give you a little field right here under new type of feature, and you can just go ahead and type a title. So we talked about slow time for our game, so we're just going to go ahead and say slow time. This is going to be our new feature. We're going to click add. And it's going to show up automatically onto this little list down here. This shows us all the features in my game. So if I double click this, I can get more information about this. Who is actually going to be responsible for this feature?
Okay.
I don't like being responsible for things, so I'm going to give it to you.
Perfect.
Mr. Dave Voiles, and I think this needs to be completed. Remember, we were talking about releases and sprints?
Yes.
On the current iteration, you can see our project is Jack Round.
Okay.
We're in release 1 because this is a brand new project. We're going to push out our first release. We're actually in the initial sprint of this project. I think slow time is a big priority for us. We're going to put that as priority 1.
All right. Yeah, we don't want to fall behind at this point.
No, we're already pretty far behind from the looks of it.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and click Save. So that's going to have our feature in there, but it's not going to show up on our board yet. We need to actually make sure that this shows up on our board. And there's a little button here that says New Linked Work Item. So we talked about having these product backlog items that map to it. So I think we need to have a new product backlog item for the art assets for our game.
Okay.
So we click that little button. It says we're going to create a new child of feature. So link type child. And we're going to change this from task to product backlog item.
Okay.
And we're going to set this to art assets for slow time.
Okay.
And comment, we're going to need, well, we need a time bar. We need some cool filler and some animations.
So if we're going to tie this back to Unity, I guess you could say this is almost like having components attached to our game object.
Yeah, you could say that. This could be multiple game objects that need to get created. You could have multiple prefabs, the art assets.
Yeah.
I'd probably create a whole nother product backlog item for tying it all together. That might be a task, but bringing it into the game itself might warrant a whole product backlog item.
Okay.
So art assets for slow time. This probably won't be you. I don't really trust your art skills.
I'm a programmer. I wouldn't trust them either.
I'm going to give this to RN since he's our resident artist and animator.
Yeah.
So one of the really important things to tell him about this is when I assign a product backlog item to one of the people in my studio, I need to give them a little bit more of a description. They're going to end up being responsible for a lot of their own tasks, especially if it's going to the art department. I might just give an art asset assignment over to whoever's responsible for the art and let them break down the task. I have no idea what art assets are going to go into that.
Right.
I'm going to give them a direction. I'm going to say, make it disco-ish because it's a disco type game. You know, we need a border, we need a filler, some animations might be cool, and a few particle effects. And I'm just going to let that go off to them and let them come up with their concepts.
Yeah.
And they'll come back to me with some concepts and we'll kind of break it out from there. And then our next day we'll have a meeting about it or stand-up where we're talking about the board. And I'll say, yeah, we went through this and we're going to allocate some more stuff.
It's a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth.
Exactly. So we'll go ahead and save that. And for a minute, I'm going to pretend that I'm RN. You know, I'm going to come and I'm going to look at this. And let's just close all of these out and go to our backlog items.
Okay.
And I'm going to see art assets for slow time. I'll be able to see this when I'm looking. I'll click on this and say, hey, that's new. What's going on here? Oh, this is assigned to me. I should probably do something with this. So he'll go ahead and click the new linked work item and start adding some tasks. So the first thing, I think this is really important, is just research and read.
Yeah.
That's going to be my number one. If I don't know what's really going on, I'm going to start assigning tasks to myself for research and read about it. He says, what is a disco? RN, I don't know if you know about him, but he doesn't speak English too well.
Okay.
And he'll come to me and say, what's a disco? And I have to explain to him, like, oh, you got the disco balls and the lights and the
music
and the
dancing.
grooving going on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I'm glad you decided to point out research and read because I'm sure you've seen this before. People will often not allocate time to doing their research in the background, right? So you don't want your boss to think you're idle or you're not doing something, but in fact you are trying to get up to speed, make sure you are all on the same page.
Yeah. A lot of times what'll happen when you're creating a project is that you'll just go in and you'll type out, oh, we just need particle effects and it needs
Just
to look like a
particle
disco.
effects.
Yeah. And you say, well, what kind of particle effects?
Right.
You know, how many particle effects?
Or you may not be
Or-
familiar with the tool or the asset or the extension that you're using at that point.
Yeah, would it make more sense to buy particle effects perhaps? Maybe we should look to see what particle effects are out there. You know, that Cartoon FX2 out
Yeah.
there was on sale for $5 the other day on the asset store.
Particle Playground, I use that pretty commonly. So, you know what,
Exactly.
that's a very good point. You know, maybe our time is better